Gang, we are back with another edition of Dark Powerrr, covering all the wrestling that happens on Tuesdays. Before we get started, guys, just remember to hit that like button, hit subscribe. We always appreciate the support. Alright, jumping straight into things, we're getting started with AEW Dark. One of the highlights of this episode of Dark is actually the very opening match. We knew in advance that we were going to have the debut of Brian Pillman Jr. on AEW, and they decided to give us that match first. So kicking off the show immediately is Brian Pillman Jr. versus Shawn Spears. Solid back and forth match to create that kind of hook for the show. The nice hot match to get us started. Shawn Spears does pick up the win. I didn't think that, once they announced that it was going to be Pillman versus Spears, I thought maybe there's an off chance that Spears loses, but the more I thought about it, I thought, no, they're not going to give that win to Pillman because they don't really have Pillman under contract. He's signed mainly to MLW, and he's allowed to work elsewhere, but at the same time, he's not signed to AEW. And with that being said, you want to give the win to the guy signed to AEW, right? And in this situation, it's actually kind of funny or interesting because MLW spoke or released a statement about this match earlier today, saying that while Brian is still under contract, as long as he wants to work with other companies under the purview of the contract, under the rules of the contract, the clauses, they have no problem with it. So Pillman was able to have this debut and a good solid match. After this, a match with some good storyline implications. Oh, and one thing is that after the match, Spears does have the metal slug, palm fist strike. So they're continuing that storyline. Speaking of storytelling, the very next match also continues storytelling that's been happening when we have a match between Big Swole and Ray Chanel, who's making her debut, kind of a fashion, I guess, I wouldn't say model, maybe like a fashion shopper gimmick or a high-end couture person. It kind of reminded me in a way, in a sense, of Ginny from the UK wrestling scene, also part of Progress Wrestling and on NXT UK, but slightly different. This situation is more that Chanel is there to kind of be the brunt or bear the brunt of Big Swole's ire towards Britt Baker. And they do show Britt Baker at one point in the crowd. Big Swole kind of is hitting moves and looking out the crowd towards where Britt is, in the role model vehicle, the Rolls Royce. And after the match, which Swole wins, she does go to confront Britt Baker, but Rebel driving the golf cart, the Rolls Royce role model vehicle, does get Britt out of the area and away from danger. After this, there is something continuing storyline developments where we have a sit down with Alex Marvez, Allie, and Brandy Rhodes. And here they're talking about what's going on back and forth between Allie and Brandy, and also how QT fits into all of this, whether the Nightmare Sisters are a thing, whether as a team they're going to continue. Dustin shows up and says, he's seen this happen many times before. He doesn't want QT to get hurt, and that Allie has an opportunity to actually do the right thing and show that she can be a good person, and he challenges her to do that. And Brandy says, she's okay with them continuing this tag team, this partnership, if you will. So it seems as though the Nightmare Sisters is going to be a thing going forward. And also a good little bit of callback to history where Allie brought up that last year at Fyter Fest, there was the match where, was that Fyter Fest or Double or Nothing? I think it was Double or Nothing. But Brandy had the debut of Kong to kind of screw over Allie. But good callbacks, good kind of showing that if Allie does turn on QT Marshall and Brandy Rhodes, that the heel has a reason for doing what she's doing. That's always important. A heel has to have good reasons, good ways of demonstrating why they are angry, why they are going to lash out at the babyface. They have to have justifications. That's the word I was looking for. Their actions have to be justified in some sense, because then as an audience we're able to say, yes, you did have justifications. Yes, you did have reasons to be upset. Legitimate reasons. But the way you went about it, the way you went about addressing those issues, those reasons, was wrong. And in that sense, you're able to root for the babyface more because you're saying, well, the babyface, yes, they may have done something wrong, but how this is going down, it's not fair. After this, we kind of move away from storytelling and back to more traditional dark fare, in that we have a match between Kazarian and Luther. Kazarian is going to pick up the win, and Luther is going to take another pinfall loss. I'm still not sure what exactly they're planning on doing with Luther, what the plans are. I don't really see anything, but I mean, at this point, maybe he's just another guy, but they keep presenting him as more than just another guy. It just something doesn't seem to be clicking properly with him and with his contract situation with them. I don't really know. This is a situation where you have an AEW versus AEW talent, so that's always important. So the fact that Luther is taking that pinfall loss is doubly important now, if you think about it from that perspective. It's just that, okay, so my perspective, at least this may be me. If it's also you, feel free to mention that in the comments. If it's not you, also feel free to mention that in the comments. But if somebody's a deathmatch wrestler, they should not go down that easily to regular wrestling, because they have exhibited the ability to withstand large amounts of pain. And when you have Luther, who they continually talk about as the original Death Dealer, and somebody who is a veteran of deathmatch wrestling, hardcore wrestling in Japan, I'm now thinking even more so that he should be able to withstand pain and torture and punishment and so on and so forth. So, to me, Luther should be the favorite going into certain matches. So the fact that he takes that loss, it doesn't work if he's not also winning. You gotta have a back and forth, right? You gotta have that back and forth. Speaking of which, after this, there is a 8-man tag match between one side, the Butcher Blade and Lucha Bros, and on the other side, Joe Alonzo, Brady Pierce, Tony Donati, and Fabo Andre. Now, this is basically a way to whet our appetite or show that Butcher and Blade and Lucha Bros can coexist properly, because tomorrow they're going to be facing FTR and Young Bucks at the second night of Fyter Fest. But I should believe that two teams, two unified entities, can find a way to coexist, as opposed to 4 people who don't have anything in common, don't have any form of tag team experience as a group, or even as individual teams within the 4 pairing, the setup of 4. And that goes back to what we're talking about with Luther and how AEW works these matches. Luther has to have wins in order to appear credible. Yes, Butcher and Blade and Lucha Bros are showing that they can work together, but how much does that really mean something if the people they're going up against really didn't stand a chance to begin with? That's something to consider. But if you couldn't already guess, Butcher, Blade, Lucha Bros do pick up the win. After this, there's probably easily the match of the night. Easily, by far, the match of the night, hands down. If Cage Match or 411 Mania or anybody says differently, you tell them they're wrong. It's Orange Cassidy versus Will Hobbs. Orange Cassidy does an amazing Superman forearm, which to me is better than Roman Reigns' just because of Orange is a smaller guy, so when he does a move like that, there's got to be more snap. And it's also, if it's going to take down a larger opponent, then you're like, wow, there's some force behind it, right? Roman is as big or bigger than almost everybody he's going to be in the ring with. So when he does a Superman punch, I'm thinking, yeah, okay, it should knock the person down. When Orange does it to somebody of Will Hobbs' size, who dwarfs him, then it means something. Orange Cassidy, one-hit quit this man. I don't know Will Hobbs from anybody, but I know he's a giant dude. And I know that he is making his debut, and he got hit with one shot, and Orange pinned him. Match of the night, by far. The psychology, the storytelling, just everything about it. Jim Cornette would love this match. Swear to God. The only match Jim Cornette might love more than the Orange Cassidy and Will Hobbs match is the very next match, which is Michael Nakazawa versus Shawn Dean. And let me tell you, it's also a firecracker. No, it isn't. But this match has... it's a bit of a comical match. Solid back and forth, I will say, in the sense that Shawn Dean is respectful enough to say, all right, let's not take Nakazawa as a complete joke. Nakazawa is, however, taking himself as a complete joke, which is his character. Nothing wrong with it. That's who he is. He is kind of the Yano of AEW in that he is a bit of a joke character. However, he also can get things done in the ring, and that goes to that holds true here. When I will say, when he did lock on the submission move the first time with his underwear, the fact that they wisely showed the models ringside who had no idea what was going on. They're just hired to be there, right, and to as part of the Fyter Fest festivities, and their reactions, classic. That made it so much better because we know what's happening, but they don't know. So that's just a legitimate shoot reaction. Great stuff. After this, probably the actual match of the night, which is Scorpio Sky versus Serpentico. If we're not gonna give Orange Cassidy the props that he deserves, but Scorpio Sky coming out again to that very sick, awesome, badass theme song, and which Taz actually kind of talks about how good that theme song is. But good match against Serpentico. Serpentico is somebody who's able to kind of keep up with a lot of the AEW talents who are either TV ready or are good enough to be on TV. Serpentico does have that ability kind of himself. He doesn't always get to show it because he's more enhancing other people, but he does get flashes, and he does get the ability to demonstrate that he could show more if it's ever required of him. A good solid match between the two of them. Scorpio Sky picks up the win. And finally, in the main event, we have the Dark Order versus Peter Avalon and Brandon Cutler. This is a match to kind of show that the Dark Order is prepped and ready for tomorrow's match against SCU. We gave wins to Kazarian, we gave wins to Scorpio Sky. Now it's time to give wins to the Dark Order. The only way this would have been a little bit more on the nose is if Colt Cabana had had a match, because Brody Lee wasn't probably going to have a match today, the same way that Christopher Daniels didn't. But here we see the Dark Order, Stu Grayson and Evil Uno tag up against Peter Avalon and Brandon Cutler. This is probably the longest match of the night, one of the better matches of the night, and it told a good story of Avalon and Cutler trying really hard continually to get on the same page, and they show moments where they can, and they show times where they can really put it together as a team, but alas, they fell short against the might of the Dark Order. Whether or not they will join the Dark Order, we don't know. Now we're back with our review of Impact Wrestling. We are 12 nights away from Slammiversary, as Josh Matthews will continue to remind us throughout the course of this episode. And they have a couple matches and storylines that move everything forward towards Slammiversary, different threads that they've been weaving together over the past few weeks, and it kind of is coming together pretty nicely. I think next week for the Go Home show that we're going to have a lot of confrontations, maybe not so much as matches, but different promo segments, which they did have a good bit of this week, so maybe hopefully they will not have too many. They will have some matches, but I think it's got to be more promo videos, really, or promo interactions than matches. It's got to be, because they've kind of set the stage already for what's going to happen. It's just a matter of teasing it out more and more, that delay of the action. Starting us off is a tag match between Susie, Kylie Rae, and Rosemary and Ty Valkyrie. Susie and Kylie Rae are going to pick up the win, which is a little bit of a surprising moment here, for me at least, because the way I see it is that Susie, the former Sue Young, the Susie persona is portrayed as kind of inept, and Kylie Rae is still considered or portrayed as a newcomer to the knockout scene. She only debuted on the scene with Impact back in November for Bound for Glory. So her presence is still relatively new. She's still an early person in the Knockouts division, whereas Rosemary is a former Knockouts champion, long history there, and Ty Valkyrie is definitely has established a foothold there. She's the longest Knockouts champion in company history, 377 days. So the fact that Kylie and Susie pick up that win, really strong work. Speaking of storylines, I will say what was kind of interesting, or cool at least, is that when the match started, it started between Susie and Rosemary had a callback to the history between Sue Young and Rosemary. And I thought that was kind of a neat thing to be able to tie that all up in a bow and say Rosemary's just she's over it, whatever's going on with Susie after the debacle with Su Yung. So after this is a 4-team match. It's the Deaners versus Reno Scum versus Triple XL and followed by TJP. This match was a bit of a mess, both in booking and just in action. There was no real control of the situation by the ref, which I guess is happening because it's a fatal 4-way in that sense. But at the same time, it almost seemed as though when they were booking the match, they said, you 4 teams are going to have X number of minutes. You just go out there and do stuff, right? Like there doesn't seem to be as much of a storyline, and I guess to me it's because you have a team in there the size of Triple XL. Anytime I see a team the size of Triple XL, I'm thinking to myself, they have to have a very good shot at winning this match. Even in the case of Fallah Bahh and TJP, like Fallah Bahh is really that heavy person, and TJP is using his speed to move around opponents and put them in places where they need to be so that he can hit them or get Fallah Bahh to be able to come in and hit them because Fallah Bahh is slower. In the case of Triple XL, it's just really hard to get them off their feet. I'm not seeing a situation where the Deaners should be winning this match, and they do win this match. It's just kind of a bit of a mess. It kind of reminded me when I see AC Romero and them, I think of when you have Rumble matches and Mark Henry's there, or Big Show is there, or Kane is there, or more recently Braun Strowman. The focus of the match shifts to them and shifts to getting them out of the ring and eliminating them. And rightfully so, right? Because that's what if we're talking about injecting realism into wrestling, into this thing called wrestling, that's realistically what would happen if it was a real fight. So when I don't see that happening, or I don't see it happening the way I feel like it should, it kind of pulls me out of it. But I mean, hey, as a TV match goes, it works, right? And that's really what's important. What's almost more important for this episode is moving along storylines. This is just a match. In a sense, it kind of sets the Deaners up for maybe a tag team title shot down the road, which means that the tag team title match itself or the tag team title storyline is more important. And we'll be getting to that. Don't you worry. After this, we have Jordynne Grace versus Kimberley. It's a short match designed to set up for a post-match live via satellite moment with Deonna Purrazzo. And I will say that Kimberley did a really good job for the time that she was given for what the purpose of the match was supposed to be. It was just to reinforce that Jordynne Grace is who she says she is. She is the Knockouts champion. And Kimberley gives her a good fight. And Kimberley does a good showing for herself. But at the end of the day, it's still about Jordynne Grace, which means it's about the virtuosa, Deonna Purrazzo. And so Jordan picks up a good win. Not too much to write home about outside of that, in the sense that I hope that Kimberley does get a title shot down the road, maybe against Deonna Purrazzo. If she's the one who wins, maybe we'll see. I do know that there's going to be that gauntlet match at Slammiversary, so more news on that coming shortly. But after this, we have Johnny Swinger versus Willie Mack. And you're wondering, if you haven't watched Impact, you're wondering, I thought, what if it was Suicide versus Willie Mack? Well, here's the thing. In between the Deaner and Jordynne Grace match, we have Swinger realizing that he's got to do something to figure out how to be ringside for the match for Chris Bay's X Division title match at Slammiversary. And so what he does is he decides to go into one of the locker rooms and try to see if he can find a mask. In the process, he will find Super Eric Young stuff, which I thought was kind of a cool and a nice tease, because Eric Young is one of the people who was released by WWE and could be one of the persons returning at Slammiversary. He's been teased. After all, he was A, one of the people released, which already qualifies him, and B, he's a former Impact World Champion, which qualifies him again. So here we have Johnny Swinger finding Suicide's mask. And he puts it on, and as he's walking around with it, Willie Mack finds him and says, hey, we're going to be having an X Division title match after all of the bad things that Chris Bay and Johnny Swinger did to you. So now, it's actually Swinger versus Willie Mack. But for some reason, Willie Mack thinks it's Suicide, even though Johnny Swinger looks nothing like Suicide, body-wise. Like, obviously the face is covered, because it's a mask. But the fact that he's wearing an outfit that clearly looks like it's Johnny Swinger underneath the Suicide clothing. So this match is very quick. Willie Mack picks up the win. I do want to look up a little bit about what has happened with the X Division because I remember that there was an issue with people there's a max weight limit. And so Willie Mack is definitely not that. So he would exceed whatever that weight limit is. So I'm interested in seeing when that changed, when exactly that happened. Because I know they went back and forth, because I know Samoa Joe at one point was X Division champion. I know Kurt Angle had all the belts as well, and he had the X Division championship. So I'm wondering when they either did away with it or put it reinstated it and put it back in, because I remember that the X Division there was that rule even going back to say 2016. So I'm interested. I'm going to do a little research and see if I can get an answer to that. If you know, put that in the comments. Let us know. After this, there is locker room talk with Madison Rayne, where we get the stunning announcement that Madison Rayne will be leaving the commentary booth for the gauntlet match to determine the number one contender to the Knockouts Division Championship, and she will actually be participating in the match. So that's kind of cool that the 5-time champion is going to be coming back, seeing a bit of her. That's really great. I always like the fact that they refuse to acknowledge that she is married to Josh Matthews, even though they are doing commentary together. Honestly, I think that's something about it just amuses the hell out of me, because he wears his wedding ring and she has a wedding something or other tattoo decal there on her where her wedding ring should be. So obviously she is married. You can easily look it up and see that she is married. We've talked about marriages not being acknowledged when it comes to Allie and QT Marshall over on AEW. So it's kind of amuses me a little bit. So after this, there is a Tommy Dreamer promo where he talks about how he gives a fake apology for everything he said about Moose. Moose comes and says that was clearly a fake apology. Tommy Dreamer says no, it was absolutely sincere, but he does have some news for him. And the news he has for Moose is that he spoke with the TNA Championship Committee, the TNA Board of Directors, and that he has been declared the number one contender for Moose's TNA World Heavyweight Championship. And Moose says that's impossible because there is no TNA Championship Board. And Dreamer says, yeah, because there's no TNA. And it's kind of to remind Moose that that title he's walking around with is not a real title. So after this, we have our main event for the evening. The main event is the match of the night. It is Josh Alexander versus Sami Callihan. Callihan and Shamrock will be teaming up against the North for the tag team titles at Slammiversary. We're getting a preview of that match to a certain extent. Earlier in the night, Callihan and Shamrock had a backstage vignette, where they demonstrated that they still don't really trust each other, but they're willing to work with each other. But Callihan refused Shamrock's offer of being ringside for the match. That's going to turn to potentially backfire on him when there's a ref bump, and it looks as though Ethan Page is going to be able to sneak out an attack on Callihan, but Shamrock runs down to the ring to make the save. And because of that, Callahan's able to pick up the win over Josh Alexander ahead of their match. How many nights? 12. You can ask Josh Matthews if you don't remember, but 12 nights away on Slammiversary. I think that's going to be a pretty good match. I think they're smart in having somebody in the ring with Shamrock in the form of Callihan, who can still definitely go, because Shamrock's really starting to slow down. I know I brought that up the first time I took over reviewing Impact from Chris, but I think it's a smart move to have somebody in there with Shamrock, and I am kind of looking forward to the match. I personally am a fan of Ethan Page from his times in freelance wrestling, where he was the former World Heavyweight Champion, and since he made my girlfriend really upset with him the first time she went to her first indie wrestling show, which was a freelance show, and he called Kylie Ray a bitch. Phenomenal times. Just really, really great memories for me. Anyway, guys, I will let you go at this moment. We will speak together soon next week when it comes to another edition of AEW Dark and Impact Wrestling. That will be the go-home show for Slammiversary. And I hope you guys will be part of watching our Slammiversary roundtable that we will have after the pay-per-view coming up when? 12 nights. Don't forget, mark your calendars. So until then, guys, I'll catch you. And remember, stay safe with everything that's going on with COVID. It's still ravaging the world, ravaging the country. Wear your mask if you do not already, which you should be doing. And if you don't, and if you feel as though it's a fake disease or whatever the case may be, even if it's fake, why not? Right? Because it's not just about you. It's about other people. And the little things that we can do to make other people feel safe and secure, we should do. If that means wearing a mask, wear the mask. It's not that big of a deal, right? So anyway, guys, until next time, I'll catch you.